The Robinson family got lost in space.
Yeah, the series was set in the far future, 1997.
1997.
Do you have a name?
My name's Will Robinson, sir. And I'm not a toy, I'm a boy.
Oh, nonsense.
This episode aired just 1 week before the series finale. Some fans and critics believe its over-the-top silliness may have contributed to the show's cancellation. Whether you love it or cringe at it, The Great Vegetable Rebellion remains one of the strangest hours of television ever produced. If this detail felt unexpected, the next one will make you question everything. Dr. Smith number 19. Dr. Smith wasn't supposed to stay. Dr. Zachary Smith, the despicable, cowardly saboteur and now a comedic icon, was never meant to last in the family. He never existed in the unaired pilot of Lost in Space, a character conceived thereafter to lend conflict to the Robinsons' journey with an eye toward being the most unidimensional of villains whose betrayal would send the family off course. But Jonathan Harris saw potential in that character and therefore decided to play it differently. Instead of pure evil, Harris gradually made Dr. Smith full of himself, constantly dishing witty insults and melodramatic flourishes. The producers began to notice that as the show transitioned toward comedy, Harris's antics, initially thought too much, gave new life to the show. Fans responded, and a character designed for quick extinction instead gained a permanent status. Dr. Smith became the most recognizable and quotable character in the show, often holding up all attention with the line, "Oh, the pain." Such was the success of his uncharacteristic transition to comic relief that it went on to redefine the very identity of the show. Barring the nuisance of Dr. Smith, Lost in Space would have faded long ago. The special guest star number 18. The special guest star power move. Jonathan Harris wasn't just smart in how he played Dr. Smith, he was just as savvy behind the scenes. When he joined Lost in Space, Harris made a bold request. Instead of being listed as a regular cast member, he wanted to be credited as a special guest star. This was highly unusual, especially for someone appearing in every single episode of the show. But Harris believed the label added a sense of prestige and uniqueness to his role. Producers agreed, and from that point on, Harris received special guest star billing in every episode, despite essentially being a lead character. It was a move that not only boosted his visibility but also separated him from the rest of the ensemble in the eyes of viewers and the industry. No one else in the main cast had this kind of credit. This title gave Harris leverage and reinforced the on-screen persona he had shaped for Dr. Smith, a character who thought he was above everyone else. In a way, the credit became an extension of the character's personality. It was a calculated decision that paid off, making Harris and Dr. Smith stand out in TV history. Off-screen romance between cast members number 17. Off-screen romance between cast members while Lost in Space presented the adventures of a family in front of the camera. Other dynamics were developing behind it. Billy Mumi, a small but curious Will Robinson, became good friends with Angela Cartwright, who played his sister Penny. The friendship blossomed into a romance as they matured. By the time Mumi was offered a driver's license, he and Cartwright were seriously dating. The relationship lasted for several years, long after the cancellation of the series. In fact, they were even engaged briefly, something few fans knew about. It was the first serious romance for both, made more special in the fact that they practically grew up together on the set. Also, even though they eventually grew apart, Mumi and Cartwright stayed close friends throughout the decades that followed. Thus, the romance behind the scenes gave their on-screen chemistry a little bit more substance. In that mix was never-ending sibling rivalry, which at times was influenced and propelled by a real and budding off-screen relationship. For all the spaceships and campy monsters, this story was one of Lost in Space's very few moments of genuine human emotion. Smith and robot missing in pilot number 16. Smith and robot missing in pilot. The Lost in Space most fans remember was not the version that producers originally pitched. In the unaired pilot titled No Place to Hide, there was no Dr. Smith and no robot, two of the most iconic elements of the series. The story focused solely on the Robinson family and Major Don West as they embarked on their space mission. Their journey was disrupted not by sabotage, but by a random meteor storm that knocked them off course. This original version was more grounded and serious, lacking the campy flair that later defined the show. After reviewing the pilot, network executives felt it needed more conflict, color, and charisma. That led to the addition of Dr. Smith, who would sabotage the mission, and the robot, who would become both a tool and a comedic companion. These last-minute changes transformed the show's tone and future. It's hard to imagine Lost in Space without Dr. Smith's dramatics or the robot's famous danger, Will Robinson, warning. Yet, if the pilot had gone forward as is, audiences might have ended up with a very different, and possibly less memorable, series, Lost in Space over Star Trek number 15. Lost in Space over Star Trek, perhaps one of the more crucial pivots in television history. In a bold gesture, CBS opted to greenlight Lost in Space rather than the other very different sci-fi concept that was being pitched almost at the same time, Star Trek. Both concepts were in the network offices around the early 1960s, but CBS executives thought that only one of them could fit into the schedule. Irwin Allen's approach was favored for its family-oriented story with what at the time seemed a more marketable, adventurous tone. Lost in Space was on first in 1965 and was very successful in the ratings at first. The series combined adventure, family dynamics, and visual smorgasbords that appealed to a wide audience. At the same time, Star Trek had settled onto NBC, where it battled with ratings before rising to syndication fame. CBS's decision would define the destinies of both franchises. Lost in Space burned brightly and briefly, while Star Trek grew into a vast, eternal expanse. In retrospect, one of the most enticing what-ifs beckons. What would sci-fi look like today if CBS had filed Lost in Space in the trash and embraced Star Trek? The robot suit cost number 14. The robot suit cost $70,000. The robot from Lost in Space wasn't just a memorable character, it was a technical achievement. Designed by Robert Kinoshita, who also created Robbie the robot from Forbidden Planet, the Robot B9 costume was built from fiberglass and intricate metal parts, totaling an astonishing $70,000 to construct, a massive investment for a 1960s TV series. On top of the cost, the suit weighed nearly 200 pounds, making it one of the heaviest costumes ever used in television at the time. Stuntman Bob May got the role of operating the robot for one very simple reason: he could fit inside the bulky suit. But wearing it wasn't easy. The limited visibility, ventilation, and mobility made it a grueling task to perform even the simplest movements. May had to memorize all his motions precisely and endure extreme discomfort for long shooting hours. Meanwhile, voice actor Dick Tufeld recorded the robot's lines separately. Despite the challenges, the robot became one of the most beloved parts of the show. It's a testament to how much craftsmanship and sacrifice went into even the most unusual roles, and how a man trapped inside a 200-pound shell helped define an era of science fiction television. Real computers were used on set number 13. Real computers were used on set. One of the most radical decisions that the creator and producer of Lost in Space, Irwin Allen, made while putting together this sci-fi series was the incorporation of computers within the setting of the spaceship Jupiter 2. Instead of using mock-ups or cardboard control panels, actual Burroughs B205 computers were installed for use in filming. The light blinkings, the knobs, and the sleek surfaces certainly added to the sense of reality in the show's high-tech look. Actually, Burroughs B205 is a real-world computer made in the 1950s and 1960s that was employed by federal agencies and research laboratories. It was set up for TV, complicated enough and modern, but definitely beyond what audiences could figure out its function. Allen was known for his obsessive attention to visual details, and this was proof of how far he would go for this illusion to work in the thick of outer space travel. These computers may not have been operational during filming, but they did give Jupiter 2 that polished, immersive sheen that set the show at the time rather apart from its other sci-fi counterparts. Here was the cleverest blend of reality and fiction, grounding wild storytelling in something quite real, albeit strange, based on a comic and novel number 12. Based on a comic and novel. While many fans think Lost in Space was an original concept, its roots go much deeper. The show was actually based on the 1962 Gold Key comic Space Family Robinson, which told the story of a scientific family exploring the galaxy. But even that comic wasn't fully original. It was inspired by the 1812 adventure novel The Swiss Family Robinson, a classic tale about a shipwrecked family surviving on a deserted island. This layered origin means that Lost in Space was essentially an adaptation of an adaptation. Irwin Allen struck a deal with the comics publisher to use the family's name and concept for his TV show, giving Lost in Space a unique pedigree. Though the comic included extra characters like a parrot and a dog, the core idea of a stranded family facing danger and discovery remained intact. Understanding this background adds new depth to the show's themes of survival, exploration, and family resilience. What began as a 19th-century adventure novel evolved into a mid-century sci-fi drama, proof that good stories can travel far, even into space. Shared alien makeup with Star Trek number 11. Shared alien makeup with Star Trek. In the heyday of television, resourcefulness was equal in importance to originality, and Lost in Space did not shy away from getting a little help in the construction of its aliens. Some of the pointed ear designs for the aliens seen in the show were created from prosthetics used in Star Trek. Although considered rivals, the two series shared a production circle, including makeup artists and effects crews who worked up and down the studios. The episode The Haunted Lighthouse featured aliens with pointed ears disturbingly similar to those of the Vulcans in Star Trek. Instead of creating entirely new molds from scratch, the handicapped Lost in Space crew cut corners by simply using materials from the Star Trek makeup department. This was a cost-cutting measure in a very tight financial and tight shooting era. This enlightening insight highlights just how intertwined the two competing shows could be. It adds unanticipated connectivity between two giant names in television history. While fans probably never saw it, the aliens on Lost in Space were literally wearing bits of Star Trek, making it a sort of crossover. Interesting stuff, but the next one takes intergalactic weirdness to a whole new level. Number 10. Conflict.